My advice, work hard and don't stop working hard because it never gets easy. You make mistakes, you learn from them, and then sometimes you remake those mistakes. You're constantly learning. It's a constant cycle. You've never made it. Never get comfortable with your skill level, with the type of stories you do. Be ambitious, work hard, and always push yourself.
Hello and welcome to the Ndini podcast. I'm Sandra Chuma. Every week, I'm bringing you conversations with bold, inspiring, trailblazing, and influential women of African descent. These are women from all walks of life, women who are entrepreneurs, artists, social activists, athletes. Each one of them, in their own way, is changing the narrative on what it means to be an African woman. They'll be telling us about their journeys and sharing their secrets to success. And I hope that by hearing their inspiring stories, you will be inspired. Nyasha, yay! Finally get to talk to you. Finally convinced you to come on. I'm like, shouldn't it be easier with my friends to get them on? But apparently
well, your
not.
friends also have insecurities like every other normal person. And I think the experience of being a journalist has made me very wary of doing interviews because, I know the business.
In what? Okay, talk about that. In what way? Like, why does it make you wary of doing interviews?
I think you really do. I mean, for the interview to be good, you have to open up. And I think I'm not good about talking about myself in that way. I think you can talk about specific things, like the subject matter of a story or something. But when people start asking you very personal questions, which is exactly what we do, especially in documentary, it can be quite difficult. I always acknowledge this when I'm interviewing people. But for that to happen to me, I think it can be quite unnerving sometimes.
You have an interesting story?
I don't know. I mean, I only tell people that when I think it's helpful, but it's true. I mean, sometimes it is helpful, but I don't like talking about myself.
Well, today we're going to talk about you. Well, let's start. Actually, for anybody listening who doesn't know who you are, who's never heard of you, start by introducing yourself, who you are and what you do.
Of course, no one's heard of me. Hi.
No, maybe after your last story, people have heard of you. No, seriously though. I told you about my experience where my niece, who I hadn't told her about your story or anything like that, she knew I knew you based on, whatever, shared something on social media a long time ago. And she literally wrote to me and was like, I saw your friend's story. So someone knows who you are.
Thank you. I appreciate your cousin or your niece. Thank you for that. My name is Nyasha Kadandara. I am a freelance journalist and filmmaker. I come from Zimbabwe. That's where I grew up. But I've lived in various places since. And for now, East Africa, Nairobi is my home.
So why East Africa? Why Nairobi?
I originally came here to work with an organization that was covering a conflict in the southern part of Sudan, not South Sudan, as many people like to get confused by. I moved here at the beginning of last year, so 2017, and then started working with this NGO, basically got a really good opportunity to go visit this, very remote, almost inaccessible area called the Nuba Mountains and cover, the health and humanitarian crisis that's happening there. And I continued working with them until about 6 months in, so until about June last year, due to some funding situations. In the end, it seemed like a better decision for me to go freelance full-time, which sounds hilarious because, they always say with freelance, it's feast or famine. In that world. So I started, basically looking for different gigs. I already knew that Nairobi was like quite a saturated market in terms of journalists and filmmakers. But at the same time, it's a really interesting space. I like visiting all the different countries in the region, doing stories about them. And it's fun, reasonable weather. you're one flight away from almost any other capital on the continent. So logistically, it's really helpful to be in that place when you're trying to book tickets to certain countries. And the community here, because it's so robust and saturated, as I said, but it's also good. It stimulates you, it's like healthy competition. There's a lot of people to collaborate with, to get ideas from, to network, mentors and stuff. So yeah, it's good in many ways. And organic food.
Oh, why?
Because, I lived in the States before, and like that's going to cost you an arm, a leg, and your cousin.
Yes, and you lived in New York, where yes, it costs your arm, your leg, your cousin, and your mother.
And your mother. Like, I cannot believe that I'm paying this much for mangoes. So I always laugh because I remember I did this story that was in a town outside of Nairobi, Thika, and it's a famous area for pineapples. And there's a big like factory that does the canned fruits that's there. And on the side of the road, people sell these strips off the pineapple, and they sell it for like 20 shillings, which is, I would say, 2 cents. And it's divine. And I just remember like eating these pineapples and being like, yeah, New York, thanks, but no thanks.
Take that, Whole Foods.
I do miss the bagels, though. I miss them so much.
So let's talk, actually, Nyasha, let's go right to the beginning, because you were not always a journalist. But before we even get to your journey to becoming a journalist, tell me so you said you grew up in Zimbabwe. Tell me about growing up in Zimbabwe and your fondest memories of growing up in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I come from a beautiful city called Bulawayo, which is the first Zimbabwean city most people do not know. It's way better than Harare. Yes, I said that on record.
No comment.
It's lovely. It's a very... I know you agree with me, so I don't even know why. Like, no comment. Everyone who's been to Bulawayo knows just how beautiful it is and how nice and calm it is, and the people are really, really friendly. And I've been going back a lot more this year and since last year, since the coup not coup. And it's a special place. It's like one of my fondest memories of... Yeah, again, organic food. Only because, like I said, I didn't move to these other countries where like chickens weren't free range, and then, the organic mango like cost a lot. So like the food was really good. In the 90s growing up, people seemed pretty happy, and it was sort of all before everything fell apart in the 2000s, and we became billionaires and trillionaires and quadrillionaires, and went back to being billionaires and then again to being trillionaires. And I think that happened about 2 more times before we eventually called it quits in 2008. But that was also a very interesting time. So yeah, I liked going to high school, and school was fun, but it was also a really interesting time. I went to a school where there were, half the students were sort of losing their homes in terms of like, the land grabbing that was happening by the government. So there was a lot of, I think, tension and more racial tension than had been in these type of schools in previous years. And, some people were losing their homes. There were a lot of people who, just because of the general economic situation, were leaving Zimbabwe, their families. Their parents are saying, we're going to Australia, we're going to Canada, we're going to the United Kingdom. So people were just, leaving. And then by the time I finished high school, I was going to go to university. And I left, I think, pretty much with the intention of never coming back to live. So I still go back to go on holiday all the time. But I think even up to now, it's home. But then I've had to build other homes in other places, which is interesting because a lot of people in Zimbabwe have experienced that, or their families are sort of split and divided, and so is in this country, and Ningi is in Johannesburg, and this, it's this fabric, this dynamic now that we're all used to.
That's so true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is sad, and it is true that, like, literally, I don't know anybody in Zim who does not have someone who lives somewhere other than Zimbabwe, which is incredibly sad.
And it's really funny because when you live in a place like Kenya, where someone will have their whole family, from their shosho, which is a grandmother, all the way down to their nieces and nephews in maybe most, 50-kilometer radius. And they're constantly going to their, equivalent of like lobola ceremony and so-and-so's christening and so-and-so's this, and someone got elected as a pastor in this church. And they have all of these family events, and some people are like so involved in their families. And I look shocked and I'm like, how is this possible? And I realize, it's not possible for me because by nature of the fact that me, my brother, and my mother live in 3 different countries, and this is a common story for a lot of people. We don't have this luxury, of being able to go to your niece's ballet recital or your uncle's promotion dinner because, we're so split.
What did you want to be when you were growing up? So you talked about high school and your experience in high school. What did you want to be growing up?
I wanted to be many things, to be very honest. And when I finished high school, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I was always good at maths, so I was always thinking of professions that had to do with numbers. So at once, I toyed with the idea of being a doctor, decided not to do that. I once thought about being an architect because I used to love playing with Lego and designing stuff. I once, when I was really small, just thought I wanted to be like my mom, which was just I just wanted to be like her because she was really successful and really good at her job, and well respected. So it had nothing to do with what she actually did. She worked for a beef processing company. But I just wanted to be like my mother. I was like, that's a job. I know it is. And
being my mom is a job.
I mean, she would agree for other reasons. But, and then even when I finished high school, to be honest, I didn't know, but I can say that I definitely did not think about doing what I'm doing now.
So what did you do? So you finished high school and then what? Where did you go?
I went to Cape Town and I started my undergraduate degree to get a Bachelor of Science in Actuarial Science, because this is what all of the smartest Zimbabwean kids, who are smart in maths go and do. And I kid you not, because up to now, every time I go back to Zim, I still meet people who do actuarial science because they were really good at maths. And then they end up doing something else. Some people actually stick with it, but I don't know. I think it's like a Zim thing. We're going to go for the craziest, most ambitious things, not even engineering. No, actuarial science. It's not even a real thing. I didn't even know up to now.
What is it even? What is it? Just sounds so complicated.
It's like statistics. It's not even math. I would argue, actually, it's not even mathematics. It's statistics. And, you go work in insurance and fix someone's numbers. I bet someone who actually is an actuary is going to write back to you and be like, she doesn't know exactly what an actual scientist is. This is why she had to go and change her major. That's exactly what they're going to write to you.
So yes, please do not write to me. She does not know exactly what an actual scientist is. Okay, so you went to university, and then that's what you studied for the 3-4 years of university?
Oh, goodness, no. I saw the light, or rather, actuarial science showed me that I was not for the profession or the discipline. And so in the first year, I didn't do that well, which is the first time for me to not have performed well at school. So it was quite an adjustment for me. But then I decided to change to just general finance. And I told myself, I'll become an investment banker. They still make lots of money. It's fine. And I started doing that. But then along the way in my second year, I decided to join the student newspaper because I wanted to do one of these university hobbies that was very different from, my academic career, but also would make me meet new people and just sort of test me in a different way. And so I went and I signed up to be a staff writer, and I think my first article was not published. And I went and asked the editor, who's now actually a very good friend of mine, why didn't you publish my article? He was like, it wasn't that good, but maybe next week. And
if we've got nothing else, we might publish.
Yeah, it was one of those. Yeah, it was one of those. Well, if we have a really, really bad week, closer to exams, it's much harder to get student writers to send stuff to the paper. So then you would pick up all of this other stuff. So I sort of kept at it because I was like, I am not going to be told that I cannot write. And so I decided to keep writing. I eventually became the editor of the newspaper in my final year. And that's actually where I spent most of my time when I was in university, which I know every time I say this to my mother and brother, they're always like, so we paid school fees for you to go and sit in a newspaper office. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. It was great.
They paid school fees so you could have a hobby.
I mean, just for the record, I graduated, guys. I did graduate with my finance degree. I did. But that last year, it was tricky. Um, and then I worked in a sort of IT finance consulting firm in Cape Town for about 2 years. And then it was in my second.
So pretty much was it like, okay, I've graduated, I have a finance degree. What's a job that I can do?
Let me just get a job. Yeah, it was like, let me get a job. I don't want to go back to Zim, obviously, because of the political and economic situations. So I was like, let me just find a job and figure out myself. And I think at the time I was like 23. So I said, I'll give myself, I think it was 1 or 2 years to just work, figure out what I'm doing. And my theory was, as long as I'm not asking anyone for money, my family, like for, to take care of me, as long as I'm paying my own rent and stuff, it's fine, whatever I'm doing. So I did this job, and people were really lovely. And I think in my second year, my boss was like saying to me, you read a lot of news, because I used to have this ritual where I would like come in, make my coffee, and then read all the like headlines of Times Live and the Cape Argus and all of these things. Well, I can't remember the Cape Times. That was the morning edition. And I would read the news, and I was like very, interested in what was happening, like in the South African space, the rise of, EFF and Julius Malema and tensions with the ANC. It was all interesting. So I would read these things, and he said, reading all these headlines and stuff will make you great in conversation. They won't really make you good at your job. When you have spare time, you should be practicing certain solutions that you could then be implementing at a client site and stuff. And I just thought, well, I should probably get a new job then. And that's when I started researching programs to go and study somewhere. And at the same time, I think my family was saying like, oh, you should probably look into doing a master's, because that's the kind of family I come from. So I was like, at first thinking, should I go and do an MBA? Because this is the natural progression for people who came from the commerce field at UCT. But then in the end, I thought, no, this is not for me. And somehow, I can't actually quite remember how, I stumbled upon the Columbia University journalism website, and I was looking at the criteria to apply. And I actually had some of the things, because I could use my experience with the newspaper, varsity newspaper, when I was at university, to apply, and just sort of like my general work experience. And they were not hell-bent on you having to, have had an undergraduate degree in journalism. So I thought, okay, let me apply. And I got in.
Did you, okay, so when you applied, and for anyone who doesn't know, Columbia Journalism School is incredibly hard to get into, because it's the only journalism school in the Ivy League. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's the only journalism school in the Ivy League, and they only take a really small class size. So did you realistically think you were going to get in when you're applying?
Yes, actually, because I don't believe in applying for things that I don't think you'll get. I never have. I've come from a very supportive family who've, my mom and my brother would always say to me, you can go to the moon if you want, Nyasha. We'll help you. Like, we'll do as much as we can to get you to NASA, and then you do it for yourself. But they always believe, like, the sky is the limit. So when I said to them, oh, this is what I'm thinking, they didn't even blink an eye. They were like, sure, cool. My mom wrote to me a few days later and be like, oh, I looked at the program. It's actually supposed to be one of the best. This is really good. It's good that you're applying here, because she wanted me to be happy, and she could see I was clearly not happy in my field. So it's not to say that I knew that I was definitely going to get in, but I did think I had a chance.
And so you got in, and you not only got into the program, but you also got into, because they do a specialization in documentary filmmaking. Why was that of interest to you? So
going back to my editor friend Remy, and the writing, I knew that writing wasn't my forte. I really respect people who work in print and like long form print journalism. But I'm a very visual person, and I thought this is the best medium for me. I love documentary. I love long form storytelling. So I knew I didn't want to do news. And I thought this is the field that I want to do. I want to be able to create the types of, documentaries that at the time, okay, Netflix was still just picking up, but that'll end up on Netflix, that people will go and watch in festivals, that people will sit and, back then they had the news hour documentaries like on BBC and stuff, and people are very, very focused on watching this piece of information because it's been produced by X outlet and it's well respected. So I thought, yeah, I really want to do that form of journalism. I just knew, I don't know.
And that's actually, in full disclosure, where you and I met. Do you remember actually?
Yes.
Do you remember the day we met?
I think I remember most of it. So I remember all the international students come a day before everybody else, the American students. And Dean Sotomayor was asking everyone where they had come from, and they were doing a tally to see how many people came from, these countries. And of course, it was like 20 Canadians and like 20 British people. And okay, maybe not 20, I'm exaggerating. But a lot of people. I remember the top countries were India, China, the United Kingdom, Canada, right?
Yeah. Those were the main countries.
So it was the top 4, and then there were all these other people, so and so is from Colombia, and it's one person, and this person is from Peru, and this person, and then they were all they were the mixed race students, so they had 2 nationalities, and then there was 2 Zimbabweans, and I was ooh, let's go find this other person. Well, I think you found me first then. I'm not sure. And there was,
I just remember.
And actually, I think all the Africans looking for each other because I remember.
Wasn't that the funniest?
They were little. We were 4 or 5 or something.
There was a little meeting of all the Africans.
Where are our people? Let's find ourselves.
But yeah, I actually remember it so vividly because I was, it was an intimidating environment to be in because you're in a foreign country, you're in New York, it's a big city, you don't know anyone, you're in this room full of people, you don't know what to expect. And I was just so excited, oh my gosh, another Zimbabwe. And I literally, as soon as there was a break, I remember literally levitating across people to don't let the girl get away. And then I came up to you and it was so funny. Now when I reflected, I'm oh my gosh, that was so funny and so awkward. But I walked up to you and I just said, because I remembered your name, because and of course Nyasha, duh, you can't get any more Zimbabwean.
Zimbabwean than that, can you?
And so I literally came up to him hi, are you Nyasha? And you said, yes. And then we hugged. I was okay, she's going to be my friend.
And for all the people who don't know, we've been laughing like this ever since that day.
Yeah, literally. I actually found a picture the other day of a picture that, oh my gosh, and her name's just escaped me. She'd killed me. I couldn't remember her name. Oh, you worked with her on that story with the art people. Do you remember? I used to call her Little Ho-Ho. Yes.
Ndini.
That's exactly. I found this picture of you and me just laughing. I'm okay. But anyway, back to you, which is much more interesting. So you end up at Columbia University. You end up in the documentary program. Tell me about your experience being at Columbia, and specifically as well, being in the documentary program.
I loved it for many reasons. So as I spoke earlier about my undergraduate experience, school didn't quite work out for me. And I'm a nerd. I always liked school. So I was yearning for this fulfilling school experience. And I was always envious of my other friends at UCT who would talk about their professors and they knew them on a one-to-one basis and they talked about their work. I had a lot of friends in the law faculty and they would follow their cases and they're just so much more involved. And the commerce field, I think everyone just wants to make money. It's quite isolating and lonely, I think, in that way. So I really wanted to have this wholesome, nerdy, full-on, 24/7 in campus school experience. I wanted to learn everything because I knew my varsity experience was nothing. And especially once you started to hear exactly that, we had people coming from really big organizations who had already been in the industry for 10 years or, even more. I thought I really want to just learn everything that I can. I want to audit every class that I can. I don't think I actually ever missed a day of school. Yeah, I was obsessed. I just wanted to do everything. I went to all the talks that I could go to. So for me, it was a really enriching experience, but I think that's partly because I gave it my all. I loved the documentary program. The classes I chose had really good professors, Anne Cooper, Lisa Cohen, Betsy West. You and I were in Lisa's class, and I still think about I'm still meant to write her. I was like, but every time the Sex and the Sugar Daddies piece, there were many times I thought about Lisa because my producer was saying the same things she used to say. And I
Isn't
was
that
like,
the
no, it's
funniest? Like
fine. I was like,
literally.
I know, but like, oh, I don't want to do it. And I thought about her so much and our experience making Queens and Knights because there were so many similar experiences and, just in the storytelling, talking about sensitive issues. So I still think about, like my professor all the time and the advice that they gave me, or my experience of working with my peers at the time, working with you, working with Olivia on Through the Night. And yeah.
Speaking of Olivia, and working with her, so you talked about, how you used to watch like all these documentaries and things on, places like BBC. You produced a documentary while you were in school that actually ended up airing on BBC. Tell me about that and how the story came about.
Yeah, so Olivia and I partnered up, I guess, at the end of the spring, no, can't remember, the fall semester. And we were originally supposed to do a documentary about a baseball team. And then eventually it came to light, well, visually, and the kids were so cute, and there was a lot of good story in it. It wasn't necessarily the type of story that we were looking for our thesis project. So we ended up having to, at the beginning of the summer semester when we were supposed to be filming, we had to sort of abandon ship and take on a new idea. Which I guess is like the first lesson for the aspiring journalist. So sometimes you just have to know when to say no and call it quits and move on to the next thing. So I think we were like looking for different ideas. And at some point, one of my Professor Betsy West's colleagues had written to her saying that she was working for this vocational training academy, and they have a graduation ceremony, and they have some really interesting people that are going to be graduating this year. And then I went to meet some of them, and one of those people happened to then be the main character of this documentary, Louis De Jesus, who was a recovering drug addict. He had been an addict for, I think, almost 20 years, so since he was a teenager, and he was now in his 40s. And he sort of just said, this is sort of the last chance I have to get clean. And now he had gone into this program where he was working as a janitor in one of the state buildings downtown. And in the beginning, he was very open to us filming, and he said, yeah, you can come with me. And I think the first thing we filmed with him was this ceremony where he actually gave this speech, and he does a lot of spoken word. So it's a really powerful spoken word piece about his addiction, growing up in the Bronx, and then also talking about his experience with his mother, who also then became our second character, who had abused him when he was a child.
First of all, I think I felt like I lived the making of that story with you. But it was what I loved about what you did with that particular piece, Nyasha, was, and this is something that, we'll get to talking about the piece that you just recently published on BBC, but with that particular piece was how you showed so beautifully that people are multi-layered, that people are complicated, that, when you kind of hear, oh, he's been an addict for 20 years, there could be some judgment about, well, just get your life together. But it was so beautifully done. Like, what for you did you come away with as a journalist from the telling of that story?
I think so. There was Luis and there was also his mother, Maria, and they were both very complicated characters because they both had a little bit of good and bad in them, in the quote unquote typical way. Maria was, she was an abusive mother who came from an abusive childhood herself. She was also a single mother, living on the welfare system with 4 boys. And it's not an easy life. And so when you sort of to unpeel the layers of her, you really got to see that, she's almost a victim of circumstance for a large part. And she did own up to the fact that she had hit her child and, had abused him quite badly in some circumstances. And she owned it, but she said, I did what I had to do. And I remember I felt like it was going to be very hard to film with Maria, but then I understand that people like to speak to people. They don't like to be alone. They need, company. And she had, really strenuous relationships with all of her children and her granddaughter. So she didn't see that many people. And so we just used to go to our house and hang out And Olivia and I would just sit in her room and she would tell us all of these cool stories about how she used to work for these like mafia people in the Bronx, like back in the day. She had really cool stories, but she also then felt really open to us. And then when we found out that she was dying of brain cancer because she had now refused to take treatment because this was the second time that she had had cancer. No, it was the third time she had cancer. She said, like, I'm done fighting. I don't want to do chemo. I just want to go. And then seeing what that meant for Lewis, which is completely unexpected because we just thought we're going to profile Lewis's journey to sobriety. And then his mom ended up being a much bigger part in the story. I think when many people watched it, a lot of people say, like, off the bat, you would want to hate Maria because of how she treated her son. But at the same time, you also ended up feeling sorry for her and understanding both sides. And it was a really good lesson for me because I think these are stories also I hadn't been exposed to growing up. I'd been brought up pretty sheltered. So to work on a film like that and spend so much time with this, complex character and see that there's so many different sides, you can be this and that is, I think she taught me that. And then so did Lewis.
So let's talk, that leads perfectly into some of the work that you're doing now, and specifically the most recent piece that you've published with the BBC is, the fact that people are multi-layered, people are complicated. Tell me about the latest piece that you've just published on BBC.
So, last week, I don't know if this is dated, but we just recently published a multimedia piece on the sugar daddy culture in Kenya. And it's a text piece followed by photography, really cool artwork from Michael Soy, but also it has 3 films that look at 3 different women who have sponsor relationships. Sponsors, by the way, is the term for sugar daddies in Kenya. And so there are 3 different characters. I filmed and edited 2 of them, which is Grace, the dancer, single mom who's looking for a big time sponsor who can not only help her take care of her daughter, but then also fund her career ambitions to be a singer because she wanted to be famous. And so she wanted to do those 2 things. And then we followed Jane, who's a student at a university in Nairobi who, her family doesn't have that much money, and she's very emphasizes that she came from a really good background in terms of the way she was raised, a loving family, and she was taught all of the right things to do as a girl. But she's decided that this is the life that she wants to live. She wants to have be able to pay for certain things at school that her family can't, and she also wants to be able to have some nice things in life, and maybe that's a new phone, maybe that's some new clothes. And so she started working in an escort massage services. Basically, you meet up with clients and you give them massages, and the bare minimum is the massage, but depending on what you negotiate with the client, it could turn into other things, including sex. And then the monetary value also then varies based on what services are provided. And so in doing this job, she then meets she meets one of her sponsors. She has 2 of them, but this is how she met the first one, who was a client of hers, and they used to talk when they would have their sessions. And so she was quite emotionally attached to her sugar daddies, which again is something that people don't necessarily think about when people have sugar daddy relationships. She would talk about how she's at university and she couldn't relate to people on campus. She couldn't relate to the guys on campus and, be with them. And she enjoyed talking to older men who, could ask her things about what she wanted to do in life, where she wanted to go after she finished university. And
Nyasha, a quick question for you. How did this even become a subject that you thought could make a good piece for something for you to work on?
Good question. So Africa Eye is a new unit that's a new investigative unit that looks at sort of hard-hitting issues, but also, looks at like things that are of social interest to Africans. The target audience is African youth, 18 to 35. So it's an idea is like produced by Africans for Africans. And they did some focus groups in the beginning to find out what people wanted to talk about, what they wanted to hear more about what things they already watched, what things they would like to see more of. And in Kenya specifically, the issue of sugar daddies came up. People saying, this is something we think BBC should look into. I personally know my girlfriend has a sponsor, because there's also another thing, you can be dating and also have a sponsor. People said that they thought this was really interesting and that it's becoming more prevalent and that BBC should look into it. And so when I sort of started working with Africa Eye and they said sugar daddies, I was like, wow, this is going to be very, very hard. But then at the same time, I think I was up to the challenge.
Very hard in what sense? In terms of finding people willing to go on the record to talk about it?
Yeah, I think to find people. So when, I was asked about it, I said, of course, this is one of the issues of the many things that came up in these focus groups. But yes, this is of relevance. I know people who have sugar daddies in other countries. I've seen this happen at the university level, but also in the working world. And I worked in corporate. I knew girls who worked in corporate who had sugar daddies. It was a common thing that we talked about. So I thought it's definitely worth a story worth doing, because I've had these conversations with my friends. But the difficulty came after having lived in Kenya for about a year. By the time we started working on this project, I sort of got to know how the general sentiment towards topics around sex work, sponsors, sugar daddies, the LGBT community. These are all sort of taboo, unspoken about things. We all know it happens, but we don't talk about it. So I knew that was going to be very hard, not only in terms of the final response, like when it came out, but also in terms of talking to people, saying, this is a story I'm thinking of doing. Do you know of people I could talk to, or what are your views on this? Is this something that you've seen? And so right off the bat, you would get people who would say, why is this even a story? Why are you investigating this?
How did you get Grace and Jane to agree to tell their stories?
Agree? I don't even know. I think Grace was sort of someone who had already been in the limelight. She danced in clubs. Her family knew this already. She wasn't shy about the fact that she believes in the hustle. She believes in taking care of her daughter, and she's going to do whatever it takes. So she wasn't shy about that. And I think because there are some people who have had sugar daddies in the past who are also somewhat celebrities or socialites in Kenya and other countries, it's the kind of thing that, could actually help your career and your publicity, and awareness then hurt you. So I think for her, it didn't seem like it was the type of thing I was going to hurt her. She was already somewhat in the limelight and, trying to become this aspiring musician in Nairobi. So I think she was more willing. Jane was a person who, and if you watch the films, she says, well, what's wrong with sex? She really was quite open, and she was very different from, I think, a lot of the students I did meet, in that she very owned her body, she owned her sexuality and was open to talking about it. So she didn't really think oh, it's a big deal. And we filmed with her at her university campus, and people would ask, what's going on? Is this a student project? She's like, no, BBC is doing a documentary about me and my life. And she knew people were going to see it, her whole university, which has since happened. And I think she just thought it's a cool topic. And I do have sponsors. Why not talk about it?
So you talked about her whole university. I've seen it. I know in one of the scenes you went to her home with her parents. Mm-hmm. So did her family know that this was what she was doing?
Her family didn't know, so them seeing the video since the documentary, now they know.
What's been the response generally to this piece? Because like you rightly pointed out, this is a controversial topic. This is one that I think most people would prefer kept on the covers. And you talked about, someone approaching you and saying, why are you doing this story? What's been the response to the story?
So as expected, there are a lot of people who, sort of feel this is a personal attack on Kenya. It's airing out their dirty laundry. There's a lot of people who say they're quite sad for the different women in the project and feel bad for them. I've seen it in the comment conversations. One person will say, this is disgraceful. I can't believe BBC is doing a story about this. But then at the same time, another person would say, guys, let's be honest with each other. We know this is actually happening. We actually do need to talk about it. A lot of people said when it came towards the text piece, that it was very nuanced and balanced, that they liked the way the girls are represented, so much so that there were a lot of people who would contact me and they would say, Jane is my favorite character, or Bridget is my favorite character, which I think for me was really, really nice to hear that, not only could you watch these characters, these women go through their journeys, but there's something in them that resonated with you, whether it was their ambition, their candidness, their openness, the way they own their sexuality. But there were a lot of people who had really good feedback about how, they were really intrigued by these women, but they liked them. They admired their ambition and they admired their honesty as well, which was a really big thing, is that everyone knows, I even say I don't like talking about myself. I can't imagine having to talk about these things in detail, what that takes, the courage it takes. And they were really all brave in telling their stories on camera without blurred faces to us.
One of the things that I know you and I struggled with when we worked together on a story, and I know you struggled with the same thing on the previous story we talked about with Lewis and his mom, is where do you draw that line between I'm a journalist and I'm reporting on a story and getting emotionally involved in some way? Like, is that something you struggle with?
I think it always comes up, I think, if you're a human, and if you're doing long form, because you just spend so much more time with people. You end up eating with them, you break bread with them, you travel with them on the train, to Mombasa. It's very intimate, sometimes you sleep in the same room as them. They become, very close to you. And it's also what helps in your storytelling, is because the more time you spend with them, the more relaxed they become with you, the more you begin to pick up on their personalities. And, almost even like, for instance, this happens all the time where a character might lie to you and you can almost tell that that doesn't actually sound right. And you can call them out on it the way you would a friend, because you know them. It's a hard balance, I would say, between maintaining professionalism and also sort of maintaining this relationship that then gives you the great story, the access with your characters.
How long were you filming for this piece? I guess filming and reporting, because it's also more than just filming, right?
Yes. I would say in total, the project took about 4 months, 4.5 months. I think but we started in November and published now. In between, I worked on other projects. I traveled to different countries to work on some other things as well. So it wasn't consistent the whole time. But yeah, I would say about 4 months to tell all the video stories, edit, and do the reporting for the text feature.
What was the most challenging aspect of telling this story?
I see. There were many challenges to telling the story. I think the need to make sure that at every point and the reporting up to the final day that the story was balanced. The woman, I was very worried about, them being called terrible things on the internet, which still happened. But, I don't want you to watch them and feel sorry for these girls or hate them or, dismiss them. I wanted you to be able to sort of identify and understand their lives and all the different complexities. And that's a big part of the editing process, is like that fine tuning. So you get to that point where you really crafted like these nuanced, balanced stories. And I think that's the most challenging part in working on a story, where the natural reaction for people is to say, well, she is a prostitute, and she is lazy and she is this and just all of the like really mean things that people can say. I didn't want it to make it easy for people to say those things. I needed to show, that Grace is a loving mother and she really does care about her daughter and this is her motivation. But she also wants to be ambitious, and ambition isn't necessarily a bad thing, that she wants to be famous. She wants to be a singer. She wants to be like Beyonce. Beyonce wanted to be like Beyonce. And then she did. So, why should we feel bad? Well, why should she feel bad for wanting those same things? Why should Jane feel bad for wanting to have this Instagram life when, truth be told, all of us who are on Instagram all have envy for someone else on Instagram in one way or the other? This is life. This is why some people take pictures of their food. Some people take pictures of their holiday, their lovely baby. I was like, we all do it. So I was like, you know what? We are in, like, this is not something that's just affects them, especially like when you look at the whole social media culture. That's for all of us. This is the age that we live in, and we can't, look down upon someone and be like, oh, she's just obsessed with social media and wants to be like these stars. It's like this, we all have an element of that.
Nyasha, what advice would you give to someone who, has seen your pieces on wherever they, at festivals, on BBC, and aspires to the career that you're working in? Like, what would be the advice that you would give?
My advice: work hard and don't stop working hard, because it never gets easy. And journalism as a profession, I found, is like you make mistakes, you learn from them, and then sometimes you remake those mistakes. You're constantly learning. It's a constant cycle. You've never made it, so never be comfortable and think just because you've done this story now you're fine. It's like the day after Sugar came out, I was like, right now, what's next? I only have to pay my bills, but I'm like, I'm still working. So yeah, I was like, never get comfortable with your skill level, with the type of stories you do. Like, be ambitious, work hard, and always push yourself, I think, is a good piece of advice. And the other piece of advice I would say is be open to the unexpected. And that can be in terms of opportunities, that can be in terms of stories. You may think, oh, I've never done a story on this, or I would never do a story on that. Never close yourself off to those things. I mean, people always ask me, well, what kind of stories do you tell? What kind of journalism do you do? And I would say, well, I do documentary, but as for stories, I like good stories. They can be anything. They're not specific to one country or to one demographic. I just want to tell good stories about people.
So I know you said that you should never be satisfied with where you are. You should always be pushing to be better. And this is probably going to be a challenging question because I know you so well. But what would you say so far in your career has been your greatest accomplishment?
Don't know. This is a very hard one. I mean, we have different accomplishments. I think I've achieved a lot personally. I don't know if that accounts as an accomplishment.
It does, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I have not been, in the year, because we are now in September. So I would say about this time last year, I was essentially unemployed, didn't have any job prospects. I didn't have any equipment. I was using other people's. I was in Nairobi and going back between South Africa, but I didn't even know where I wanted to stay, what was going on, because I had just become freelance and everything felt uncertain, and I was looking for jobs, and it was really, really challenging. And I was going for these interviews, but for jobs that I actually didn't want. But I think in the year, I really had to open myself up to like the unexpected. I really had to throw myself into this freelance career and make it work for me. And I think so I would say for me, it's more of the personal. I've managed to survive the failures in the reporting, the trip that didn't happen, the gig that got cancelled, the character that then decided they didn't want to be filmed anymore, the publisher who said, oh, we actually don't want to take the story anymore, the publisher who then said, oh yeah, we will, but not right now, we'll do it in 3 months' time. All of those things, I think for me, it's like, it's not easy to deal with those things, but I think I'm just so much more prepared for it. And now when things come my way and someone says, we can't do this or this has changed, just take a deep breath and be like, you've got this, you know how it's going to be fine. And I think for me, that's personally, especially if you've known me, I'm like a big freak out person. And I really had to learn to be calm and think about what I'm going to do and be thoughtful and say, in the long run, what's really going to matter.
So if I step away for a moment from being the interviewer and, and step into my role as your friend, I would say that you have truly blown me away over these last couple of years. So, I mean, we obviously don't have time to go into your whole backstory, but you had a really cool gig going in New York. You had the opportunity to stay in New York. You're working for a major production company on some really cool projects, but you'd always said that you wanted to go back to Africa and to tell African stories. And like for someone looking at it, it's like, whoa, you're going to walk away from this opportunity that's just it was a pretty awesome opportunity that you had.
Yeah.
And you stepped into what you're doing now, which still has zero certainty, zero guarantees. You know what? Every day is a hustle. And I've, from close, from far, just observed you go through, like you say, some projects that have worked out, some projects that haven't worked out, and stay true to the course and stay true to you. And I honestly am so inspired by you. Like some of the things that you have done, I'm just like, wow. Like, wow,
Oh, thank you.
So I'm so proud of you. So proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, a lot has happened. I will say New York is great and I miss it for many things. But I also think it's really cool to tell these stories, like especially working for units like Africa Eye, for like the African audience. Like since when did people consider us like a target audience? So always, trying to sell a story about some conflict or some political situation to, the Western media so that they care and make the whole characters resonate with them. And I was like, this is a thing that's so close to home for us. And let's do a story that you will understand and your mother will understand and your niece and your nephew and or your friend in Ghana and your cousin who's like at school in Botswana. Like it's really nice to be able to do stories like that are African and that are for the continent as well as other people, because Sex and the Sugar Daddies was for everyone. I think that for me has been really fulfilling, and I guess it won't hurt that, sometimes you encounter someone and they're talking hectically about this thing and be like, did you see what BBC produced? And they're having this heated debate and some people are saying it's this and these girls are like that. And they're having this whole conversation. You just walk past and you just smile because you're like, that's exactly what you wanted, is you wanted people to talk. You wanted to start a conversation and they're having that conversation.
So that's a great segue into what is the impact that you want to have in the world or that you want your stories to have in the world?
Yeah, I've been a journalist not too long, but long enough to know that I don't think all the stories we'll ever do will change the world and make them a better place, which is, I think, what I told myself when I first started. And I really want to change Africa and fix everything. And I don't think I'll be able to fix anything, but I think I can change some people's minds. And what they do with that information, whether it ends up being a policy action or, for instance, at the Sex and the Sugar Daddies piece, someone from an NGO actually wrote to me saying, I've been trying to express that the, sponsors and sugar daddies are a group that we need to be targeting in terms of HIV response. And your article is the one that finally got the message across. That's really nice. Because now, something's actually going to happen. People are going to use that type of work to then implement a policy that could change some people's lives. But at this point, I think realistically, I just want people to consume these stories and then think of things from a different perspective, a perspective they haven't thought of before. And perhaps opening their minds will then change the way they go about certain decisions or thoughts about people.
So Nyasha, you just published this major piece. What's next for you?
I'm still working. I'm still freelance. I'm working on a couple of projects, a long-form project in Zimbabwe that I can't go into too much detail about, but it's nice because it's the first time I'll be doing something long-form in my home country, which is also quite challenging, and I'm relearning Zimbabwe in new eyes. And learning things even about my childhood in new eyes, which is very interesting. And I am also working on a project, a virtual reality film in Chad about the humanitarian crisis happening around the lake region and looking at the insurgency of Boko Haram. So that's also a project I'm working on. And I'm now researching new projects to hopefully, work with Africa Eye Unit again, because I really like these sort of social issues. So I'm now sort of doing my research and thinking about what's next. And then I'm also trying to plan a holiday at some point, because I haven't gone on holiday in a very long time. So hopefully that'll happen at some point.
Nyasha, what's your biggest dream for yourself?
I want to win an Oscar. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. That's like my thing. Is like I really want to win an Oscar for a documentary and take my mother to the Academy Awards. I think we would have so much fun.
Oh, yes, you would have so much fun.
And I just want to go there, and I hope it's a good year where there's like really like George Clooney's there, and Leonardo DiCaprio is there, and Meryl Streep is there, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, and Denzel Washington, and then I'll just be going up to them and be like, look, I'm also nominated, but that's not really why I came. I actually only came to take a selfie with you. And like, if I could take a selfie with Lupita, I mean, like, my goodness, guys, my day would be made. So really, I want to work hard to make this film that I get nominated for an Oscar, just so I can take selfies with really famous people, with my mother. Because we're taking the selfies together.
Which is a great goal. And I will be cheering you on. And I know you can do it. I've worked with you. I've had the pleasure of working with you, and you have won already some awards. And so I know it's not an impossible dream. Like, it's entirely possible.
I like the way you say we, Sandra, have won some awards. And money, which is right.
And money, yes. We like the awards that came with money.
You like with the money. Yeah. Not these other awards, like good job.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't need the trophy. What am I going to do with the trophy? I just want the money. Send the check.
I still have my trophy, and because I keep moving so much, I really just want to like get rid of it somewhere. But then I'm always like, humble beginnings, Nyasha, humble beginnings. This is where it started. This thing has to stay with you for life, and it's so big, and it's made of glass. It's so heavy.
You need to take it home and store it at your mom's.
Oh yeah, maybe I should have just given it to her.
Because she'll keep it, and then the day when you're at the Oscars, she will remind you and pull out that trophy, remember our glass trophy, and be like, remember when you won this? And we lost our minds because we'd won.
You really did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
On to more serious things. What are you most grateful for right now?
These are some really good questions, but really difficult. And I feel like I should have prepared. I had not prepared for these questions. What am I most grateful for? I think I'm most grateful for the support that has come from my family and all of my friends throughout the ages. Since I became a journalist, since I toyed with the idea of even going to journalism school, those people are still the first people who will share my pieces. And when I'm really having tough days, they'll say, you can do it. When a shoot didn't go well, you messed up. They're supportive. They come up with solutions. They make you try again when you're about to give up. Yeah, I think the support that's come from my network of my colleagues, friends, and family is unfounded. And I know a lot of people, especially in journalism, who don't have that support. And I've always been lucky that this has never been one of those things that people didn't support in my life, because it takes so much of my life. So I'm most grateful for all of those people, especially my mother.
Nyasha, it has been so much fun. Where can people find you if they want to, if they dare to?
Guys, I'm a really nice person. I should have checked my disclaimers. To see the work I'm working on, you can go to my website, which is nyashakadandara.com. And my handles are the same. It's all Miss MISS Nyasha, NYASHAK, because we have so many Nyashas, I had to have a K. So sorry, MISS NYASHAK for Instagram and Twitter. And you can send me a message on Facebook. I do use my real name as well, so I'm happy to chat there. But I think I'm most Instagram is my thing. Again, I'm a visual person, so I like pictures and videos.
Nyasha, it's been so much fun. I can't believe it took me this
Too
long
much
to
fun.
convince you. I was like, my friends will be easy to go, oh my gosh. Because we have another friend who I shall not name because I'm not going to out her, but I'm outing you, Oni. I've been trying to get, like, she'll agree, and then she'll be like, oh, no, I can't. And I'm like, Oni.
Like, real talk, I wanted to send you a message and be like, I really don't feel like doing this today, but you are my bestie, so it's fine. So I'm prepared. Now you know how I feel when you didn't tell me about your birthday. That's how I feel.
This still really bothers you. Like, how many years on and it still really bothers you?
Because I was still very hurt by these actions of yours. I was very hurt by them.
But you threw me enough surprise parties to more than compensate. So,
by the way, guys, the last one was amazing.
It was, and it really was surprise. Surprise. So thank you. Nyasha, last question. As you know, sorry, go ahead.
These questions.
It's the last one.
Prepare for this one. I know it's the last one. I know which one it is. I still didn't prepare.
Nyasha, how many of do you not wait? So do you not listen to this?
No, I do. No, but that's what I'm saying. I even know what the questions are, but I didn't prepare, and I should have prepared. That's what I'm saying. It's nothing to do with you, Sandra. I listen to the podcast. It's all me. I'm the problem here.
Okay, so you talked about our professor, Lisa, and that was one of the reasons she said you should never give the people the questions in advance because then they'll give you scripted answers. So I'm glad you didn't prepare.
True. This is true. I think it's been very
last question.
Yes.
Then you can go to your editing. Finish the sentence. I am
my own wildest dreams.
That was beautiful. Nyasha.
I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Nyasha. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ndini podcast. I don't take even a single listener for granted. As you know, my goal with this platform is to help shift and change the narrative on Africa, and in particular about African women. But I need your help to do that. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also follow us on SoundCloud. And please share. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. It helps me to bring great guests to the show, and it also helps others discover the podcast. And of course, I always want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my conversation with our guest today and what you took away from it or what inspired you. I'd also love to hear from you if you have suggestions for other women you think I should absolutely have on the show. Our handle on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is @Ndini Media. Or you can reach out to me through our website, which is ndini.com. That's NDINI.com. Until next time, I'm Sandra Chuma. Be well.